Hello, third grade. This is part 7 of the Sisters Grimm. The old man's eyes turned ice blue, and a bit of his wolf voice came out. "I'll show you a villain, trickster." Glistening wings sprang from Puck's back and flapped loudly. He flew quickly through the house, slammed the front door as he left. Mr. Canis leaned against the kitchen doorway and tried to catch his breath. This was the first day he'd been out of his room in 3 weeks, and it hadn't been an easy one. If the old man was struggling with keeping his emotions in check, the last 4 hours had been an incredible test. "Mr. Canis," Granny said, rubbing the old man's back with her palm, "go and rest." "There may be more danger," Canis insisted. "Old friend, I already have 3 children arguing all the time," Granny scolded. "I do not need another." The old man nodded and shuffled out of the kitchen. "Who's the widow?" Sabrina asked. "Hans Christian Andersen wrote about her in The Snow Queen. She's an old friend," Granny said. "She might be able to shed some light on the crow feathers we found. She's sort of an expert on birds." "So you don't think the frog girl killed Mr. Grumpner?" Sabrina said. "No, frogs don't make webs," the old woman said. "Neither do birds." "True, but the birds may have seen something." When dinner was ready, Granny and the girls met in the dining room. Delphine's skin was red from scrubbing, and her hair was wrapped up in a big white towel. The family took their seats. Granny served herself and the girls some hot soup and buttered rolls. The soup tasted like warm butterscotch pudding, but Sabrina was so hungry she didn't even have the strength to make her usual complaints about grandmother's weird food. Between slurps of soup, the old woman jotted some notes in her notebook. "Well, then, it looks like we've got 2 monsters on our hands now," Granny said. "One frog girl." Delphine muttered something between bites of bread. "What?" Delphine swallowed. "And a giant spider," she repeated, and then immediately stuffed an oversized bite into her mouth. "I agree," Granny said. Charming was way off on his army of spiders theory. "I think it was one big one." "Don't forget the broken window," Sabrina said. "That's how it got inside." "Maybe," Granny replied. "You don't think so?" the girl asked. "The glass was all over the floor, so something came in through that window. And by how spread out the shards of glass were, I'd say it came in fast." "Ugh," Delphine mumbled with a mouthful of soup. "Right, the birds," Sabrina said. "The black feathers were underneath the window. But that's where I get confused. Why would birds have to come into the room?" "Birds eat spiders," Granny explained as she stood up and crossed the room to a pile of books stacked next to the radiator. She tugged at a couple in the middle of the stack and sent the rest tumbling to the ground. She left the fallen pile where it was and returned to the table. Granny wasn't much of a housekeeper. "This book is just about everything ever written on giant monster spiders," Granny said, setting it in front of the girls. "It's a bit dry, but the author has an unhealthy fear of certain animals, but it might be helpful." Sabrina eyed the book, entitled Magical Mutations of Insects, Spiders and Kitties. She opened the cover and saw a crude drawing of a giant kitten chewing on several screaming farmers. She flipped to another page and a thin pamphlet fell out. She picked it up and examined it. The cover read Rumpelstiltskin's Secret Nature. "What's this?" she said, leafing through it. The pages were filled with tiny, neat writing. "I've been looking for that for ages," Granny said. "That's a book your great-aunt Matilda Grimm wrote." Delphine looked at the pamphlet. Rumple, what's this say?" It's called Rumpelstiltskin's Secret Nature, her grandmother said, taking the booklet from the little girl. Matilda wrote a lot about Rumpelstiltskin. You could say she was one of the few fairy tale specialists in the family. She had dozens of theories on why Rumpelstiltskin kept trying to trick people out of their firstborn children. You should read it when you get a chance. I'll check it out later, Sabrina said, setting the mutation book aside. Any room for more camel hump soup? Granny asked, as she got up from the table. This is made from a camel's hump? Sabrina cried, dropping her spoon as images of sweating, flea-covered camels danced around in her head. She'd seen one at the Bronx Zoo with her father and could still smell its rank breath years later. She felt sick. Actually, it's 2-hump camel soup, but I only use the second hump, Granny explained. The first hump is a little tough, and besides, it's the second hump that has all the flavor. The girl stared at the old woman as if she were playing an elaborate joke on them, but Sabrina could see from her expression that she was serious. Of course, Delphine clapped her hands happily and cried, I'll have more, and this time make sure there's some extra hump in there. Sabrina slowly pushed her near-empty bowl away just as there was a knock at the front door. Granny, who was on her way to the kitchen, stopped and rushed to answer it, with the girls following right behind her. There on the porch stood a humongous black crow, its eyes and beaks bobbing nervously, and its squawk was ear-shattering. On one of its legs was a black ribbon, and when it saw the family, it dipped its head in what Sabrina guessed was a bow of respect. Good afternoon, widow, Granny said to the bird. Good afternoon to you, Relda Grimm. The crow croaked in a scratchy yet feminine voice. Delphine squealed in delight, but Sabrina's stomach did a flip-flop. More talking animals? Ugh. Do you know that little brat you sent plucked a feather out of my behind and laughed, the crow continued. I'm very sorry, Granny apologized. I haven't seen you as a crow in some time. Well, the boy said it was important, so I did the bird thing. Normally, I take the 7 down to the 40 and get off on Miller Road, but you know the distance with all the orange cones, and right now, the 18 is backed up for miles. At this time of night, flying is really the quickest way, the bird croaked. Your English is coming along. Very well, Granny said. Thank you, the crow cawed. Some of the others refused to speak anything but crowish, but I say you have to adapt. It's good to learn new things. I've been surfing the web. What fun, Granny said with a smile. I was wondering if you had heard about the human that was killed today at the elementary school. Yes, I have, the widow replied. Want to know how I know? Granny nodded. A little bird told me, the crow said, and for a moment there was silence. Get it? A little bird told me? That's very funny, the old woman said with a pained smile. Sabrina rolled her eyes, but Delphine laughed so hard she snorted. Oh, I like the little one, the crow chuckled. You've got to have a good sense of humor to live in this town. The death was very suspicious, Granny said, trying to steer the conversation back to the murder. She took one of the black feathers they had found in the classroom out of her handbag and held it out to the bird. This was at the crime scene. I've heard rumblings in the flock, the widow said, eyeing the feather. Rumblings? Granny asked. The bird hesitated and looked around as if someone might be listening. Some of the crows claim they blacked out. They said they can't account for about 15 minutes of the day, the crow whispered. The ones I talked to said they heard music, and suddenly they were all standing around the schoolyard, unsure of how they got there. Sounds like the piper is back to his old games. That would be unfortunate, Granny said. But I don't think it's your biggest problem, the crow continued. Someone sent you a message, and I'm warning you, Relda, you don't want to mess with the Scarlet Hand. I don't know what you're talking about, the old woman said. What message? It's all over your house, Relda. Whatever you've gotten involved in this time has attracted the attention of some very bad people. Sabrina and Delphine ran down the porch steps and looked up at the house. On the window, roof, and even on the chimney were red-painted hands, just like the one they found on the chalkboard in Mr. Grumpner's room. Who did this? Sabrina asked. We've only been home for an hour, Delphine added. The widow hopped down the steps and flew into the air. Keep your nestlings close, the crow squawked as it disappeared over the tree line. Girls, get back in the house, Granny said sternly. Chapter 6. It was obvious to Sabrina that the Scarlet Hand had spooked Granny. The old woman spent the rest of the night silently digging through her old books and taking notes. When the girls announced they were going to bed, she mumbled what sounded like good night, but kept researching. While Delphine brushed her teeth, Sabrina ran her head under the bathtub faucet and washed her hair for the 4th time that day. She wrapped it in a towel, and the girls headed for their bedroom. Delphine put on her favorite pair of footy pajamas and pinned her deputy badge to them. After buffing it until it shined, she went to her father's desk, which the little girl was slowly converting into a beauty parlor, and took a hairbrush from one of the drawers. Can I? She asked. Sabrina nodded, and her little sister climbed up on the bed, took the towel off the older girl's head, and ran the brush over her long blonde hair. For some reason, brushing Sabrina's hair helped calm Delphine down so that she could go to sleep. After finding a dead body, being attacked by a frog girl, nearly dying with Granny behind the wheel of the car, and having the house vandalized right under their noses, Delphine would be brushing for a long time, Sabrina suspected. You okay? She asked. I can't get Mr. Grumpner's face out of my head, Delphine replied. Try not to think about it. But we have to think about it. Now that we're police officers, it's up to us to find the killer. I think we should let the sheriff handle this one, Sabrina said. We can't. We made a vow. Besides, the town needs us to solve the mystery. We are Grimms, and this is what we need to do is find Mom and Dad, Sabrina interrupted. We'll find them, as her sister said. I don't know how. We've been here for 3 weeks and have spent all our time catching Lilliputans and killing giants. Isn't it time to start putting Mom and Dad first? The mayor needs our help. And while we're busy doing the mayor's job, Mom and Dad are still missing, Sabrina snapped. How do we know that Charming isn't responsible? He wouldn't do that. He's an ever-after, Delphine. Ever-afters can't be what? Delphine said. Ever-afters can't be what? Trusted, Sabrina exploded. Her sister looked at Sabrina as if she didn't recognize her. It was an expression more hurtful than any word the little girl could have said. It's obvious an ever-after kidnapped our parents, and it's also obvious that an ever-after is behind Grumpner's murder, Sabrina tried to explain. Sabrina, they're not all bad. All the ones I've met, the older girl insisted. Delphine set the hairbrush on the nightstand, crawled under the covers, and turned her back on her sister. I don't like you very much right now, she whispered. You'll see I'm right soon enough, Sabrina said. She stared up at the ceiling, waiting for Dolphine to reply, but the little girl remained quiet. Sabrina told herself she didn't care. Dolphine wasn't going to make her feel guilty. She'd worried about being tolerant and accepting when their mother and father came home. "Good night," she whispered, but her sister said nothing. Sabrina snatched a copy of the Blue Fairy book off the nightstand and opened it to page 1. Maybe there was something in the book, some kind of magic she could use to find her parents. Once the house was quiet, Sabrina grabbed her set of keys from under the bed and snatched a book off the nightstand and headed to Mirror's room. When she walked through the portal, she found him with a reflective silver card under his chin and a tanning lamp shining on his face. On a nearby table, he had a pitcher of margaritas and a bottle of suntan lotion. When he saw Sabrina, he smiled and flicked off the lamp. "Just in time, kiddo," the little man said. "I'm roasting over here. How was your first day of school?" "Oh, the usual. The kids made fun of me. I punched a bully, and a teacher was murdered by a monster," Sabrina replied. "Sixth grade isn't how I remember," Mirror said, reaching over the table to pour himself a fresh drink. "Sorry, I'd offer you one, but you're a bit young. How about a Shirley Temple?" "No thanks," Sabrina said. "I remember my school days. It wasn't easy for a shy talking mirror, but I managed. Trust me, Starfish. It gets better the day after." "The day after what?" "The day after you graduate," Mirror said. "Are you feeling okay? You look flushed." "I think I'm getting sick," the girl said, holding her hand to her forehead to check for a fever. "I've been getting headaches all day, and I've been a cranky jerk to almost everyone." "Sounds like puberty to me. If you think school is rough now, wait until you start getting zits." "So, you're sure I'm not sick?" "Completely, kiddo. I remember when your dad went through it. He was in a fist fight every day for 2 weeks. I remember one time he got your grandfather so angry the old man chased him up a tree." Mirror laughed. "So, this is normal?" Sabrina said. "I thought I was going crazy." "I didn't say you weren't going crazy," the little man responded. "I just said you were growing up. The two are not mutually exclusive. So, did you just come here to chat, or are we going on a magic hunt again tonight?" Sabrina sheepishly held out a book about King Arthur's powerful wizard Merlin. "Come on, kiddo," Mirror said, sounding resigned, and Sabrina followed him down the hall. Earlier the next morning, Sabrina walked to a thundering racket followed by a series of thuds and crashes that knocked a picture off her bedroom wall. Something was going on at the end of the hallway that sounded like a fist fight, and Sabrina knew there could be only one source of chaos: Puck. She eyed the clock and saw it was only 5 a.m., and her blood began to boil. 5 a.m. was too early for this nonsense. Of course, Delphine slept through the noise, snoring away as if nothing was happening. The little girl could sleep through World War III. The only thing she wouldn't sleep through was breakfast. Sabrina leapt out of bed and marched down the hallway. The day before had taught her not to just barge into his room, so she banged on the door angrily instead. After several moments, she realized that the tremendous noise she heard wasn't coming from inside Puck's room, but from the bathroom down the hallway. Fearing her grandmother had fallen in the tub, Sabrina rushed to the bathroom door, grabbed the knob, and flung the door open just as a nearly naked 12-year-old boy ran past her. "Puck," Granny cried, "come back here." Mr. Canis leapt to his feet and rushed past Sabrina, chasing the boy who had fled downstairs. "What's going on?" the girl asked as she peered into the bathroom. It was a complete disaster. The bathtub was surrounded by a dozen empty bottles of shampoo. and what looked like the wrappings of at least 20 bars of soap. The inside of the tub was filled with an oily black sludge that slowly spiraled down the drain. On the toilet basin was a plate where 4 fat worms, several dead beetles, a hand grenade, and 36 cents in change had been collected. Puck is having his bath. His 8th bath, Granny said, partially exhausted and partially annoyed. You've let him out, and now he's probably in the woods rolling in who knows what. Again. He's taking a bath, Sabrina said. Puck hadn't taken a bath since he moved into the house, and his unbearable stink had ruined many a meal for the girl. One whiff of his nauseating aroma was all anyone needed to realize that the Trickster King and soap were bitter enemies. Not that I'm complaining, but why is he taking a bath? We felt it was necessary under the circumstances, said Granny. Sabrina noticed that the old woman was wearing plastic gloves to protect her hands. Circumstances? What circumstances? But Granny's explanation was interrupted by Mr. Canis, who stomped back up the stairs with the boy in his arms. Puck squirmed and kicked the entire time. "This is rubbish," he shrieked at the old man, dragged him back into the bathroom and wrapped him in a clean towel. "The tub is clogged again," Granny said. "I suppose we could try another round on the teeth while it's draining." Sabrina eyed the bathroom sink, where 4 worn-down and abused toothbrushes had met their doom. Several tubes of toothpaste littered the floor. Each had been thoroughly emptied of all of its cavity-fighting protection. "Will someone please tell me what is going on here?" Sabrina demanded. Puck turned and smirked at the girl. A devilish gleam sparkled in his eyes, and he temporarily ceased his indignant protests. "Guess what, Piggy? I'm going to school with you today," he shouted as he kicked the door closed in her face. "I'm going to be your bodyguard." "Yes, you absolutely do need a bodyguard," Granny argued with Sabrina as she tried to pat Delphine's hair down with her hand. The little girl had molded her stale glue-soaked locks into a pointy mohawk that stood about 1.5 feet above her head. Finding little success, Granny gave up and turned her attention to serving each girl glow-in-the-dark waffles for breakfast. "We've got 2 monsters running around in the hallways." "But why him?" Sabrina cried. Her own hair had become super curly after her multiple shampoos, producing an almost perfect globe shape with a yellow tennis ball. "Why don't you come?" she said to her grandmother. "You could use a fairy godmother wand to change yourself into a kid." "I'd look like a kid, but I'd still be an old lady," said Granny. "This way, if something happens, then at least there's someone around who can fight." "Actually," Delphine said, shoveling half of her glowing waffle into her mouth, "I think it's a great idea. He's our age, and none of the kids will know who he is." Sabrina shot her sister a betrayed look, but the little girl didn't see it. She was obviously still angry and refusing to make eye contact with her. "Oh, no. They won't notice him at all until he turns into a monkey and throws his own poop down the hallway," Sabrina said. "It's not like the kids are going to notice the 15 layers of crud he has under his pits. He smells like Coney Island after a clam-eating contest." "Excuse me?" Puck inquired. The boy had slipped into the room without anyone seeing him. Sabrina turned to give him her usual nasty look, but when she saw how he had transformed, she dropped her fork. Puck was clean, shiny, and blonde. He had been scrubbed from head to toe. His leaf-infested, raggedy hair was neat and combed, and his teeth sparkled like diamonds. Even his ever-present ratty green hoodie and jeans had been retired and placed with black cargo pants, a striped baby blue rugby shirt, and brand new sneakers. Puck, you're, Sabrina stumbled. You're a hottie, Delphine shouted. Sabrina hated herself, but she had to agree. Puck, the shapeshifter, the royal pain in the rear, had transformed into a cute boy. Sabrina couldn't help but stare, even when he caught her. Yes, it's me, he said as he took his seat. Please don't hate me because I'm beautiful. Granny placed a platter of waffles in front of him, and he shoveled them into his mouth with his bare hands. Whatever spell he had cast on Sabrina quickly faded as she watched him pour some maple syrup down his throat and take a bite out of a stick of butter. Puck, Granny groaned as she wiped syrup off the boy's face. Use a fork. You don't want to have to take another bath, do you? So you ran the garden hose over him? What about the insanity on the inside? Sabrina asked, still doing her best not to look at him. Puck grinned at her, and his green eyes made her want to cry. She couldn't like Puck. He was disgusting. He wasn't even a real boy. Don't worry, old lady, he said with a grin. I'll behave. Besides, who's going to notice me with these two and their hair? Suddenly, his head morphed into a donkey head. He brayed and laughed and spit all over Sabrina. Puck, sweetie. No shape-shifting at the table, Granny lectured. Just getting it out of my system, the boy said, transforming back to normal. Sabrina wanted to die. Even when he was being disgusting, he was cute. Puck looked over at Sabrina, who was wiping his spittle off her face. Hey, ugly, is that your face? Or did your neck just throw up? Sabrina was horrified. Did he think she was ugly? Why would he say such a horrible thing in front of everyone? But then it dawned on her. This beautiful boy sitting across from her was still Puck the trickster. He was the boy who had dumped her in a bathtub of goo and put a tarantula in her bed. Puck was still Puck, even after a makeover. This is ridiculous, she said. You're sending him because of all the Scarlet Hand message business, when we all know he's the one who did it. You think I made all those handprints on the house? Puck asked. Who else? She cried. You're the so-called trickster king. You were pretty mad at when Granny sent you out to get the widow. You decided to get your revenge by scaring us. Why not add a little terror to your bag of pranks? I think the glue in buttermilk is seeping out of your hair and into your itty-bitty brain, the boy snapped. I believe him, Delphine declared. He always admits when he does stuff. He's proud of it. Sabrina turned to her and fumed. Once again, her own sister had taken Puck's side against her. Well, I'm pretty proud of my right hook, Sabrina shouted, returning her attention to Puck. Why don't you come over here and I'll show you? Granny shouted. The children spun around to see the face of the old woman. She was flushed, and her little button nose was flaring. Enough with the shouting. He started it, Sabrina shouted. She started it, shouted Puck. Puck is going to school with you, Granny said firmly. End of discussion. Everyone sat silently for a moment, staring down at their breakfast. By the way, Marshmallow, Puck said to Delphine, breaking the silence, how many warts did you find this morning? The little girl rolled up her sleeves and showed the boy her arms. Not a one. Puck sighed. That's a shame. Why? Well, if you're going to have little ones, they would have already shown up. You could put cream on them, and they'd go away in a day or two. But the really big ones take a couple days to show. Those are the kind that end up on the tip of your nose or growing out of your neck. You have to have surgery to get rid of them. Delphine shrieked and jumped from her seat. In no time she was running up the stairs to the bathroom again. "You better scrub harder this time," Puck shouted in his little girl voice. "How is Captain Maturity going to keep an eye on both of us at the same time? Delphine and I aren't in the same grade." "Puck is there to watch you, Sabrina. Delphine will be safe with Snow White. Snow's a good friend and has volunteered to keep an eye on your sister. Don't worry, old lady. I'll keep this one out of any trouble."